We picture the end of Pompeii as a sudden, unpredictable strike from nature, a city caught entirely off guard, frozen in terror on what started as an ordinary afternoon. But the geological record and survivor accounts tell a different story. Mount Vesuvius spent 17 years screaming that it was about to detonate, which leaves us with a deeply unsettling question. Why did tens of thousands of people look directly at these escalating violent warnings and decide to go about their daily routines instead of running for their lives? Pompeii is a lethal case study in how the human brain processes an impending disaster. It exposes how easily we can convince ourselves that everything is fine right up until the exact moment it isn't. In the year 79, the Bay of Naples was the wealthiest corner of the Roman Empire. You had Pompeii, a loud, bustling commercial hub packed with middle-class merchants, and just to the west, Herculaneum, an exclusive, quiet resort town for the Roman elite. Both cities shared the same horizon, dominated by a massive green mountain. 17 years before the eruption, that mountain delivered a catastrophic blow. A violent earthquake shattered temples and tore apart the water pipes in Pompeii. Instead of abandoning the unstable ground, the citizens stubbornly propped up scaffolding and rebuilt their city to be bigger than before. By the days immediately preceding the eruption, the warning signs became impossible to miss. Underground heat evaporated the local wells. Fissures leaked sulfur into the air. Flocks of sheep died mysteriously, and farm dogs howled all night. The Romans didn't have the science to understand magma pressure, but they did possess a psychological blind spot we still share today: normalcy bias. When faced with a massive, unprecedented threat, the human brain defaults to the familiar. We rationalize the danger, telling ourselves it's just a strange storm or a temporary disruption. Because the tremors and the sulfur had become part of daily life, normalcy bias blinded the population to the reality beneath their feet. They looked at a waking geological time bomb and saw nothing but a fertile hill. Around 1 in the afternoon, the pressure finally shattered the rock sealing the volcano's crater. A supersonic column of superheated gas, ash, and pumice shot straight up into the stratosphere, climbing higher than the mountain itself. In Pompeii, panic set in as the sky turned completely black. But across the bay in Misenum, the Roman admiral and scientist Pliny the Elder watched the massive cloud form. Driven by reason and scientific curiosity, he assumed the distant flames were simply abandoned farm fires, entirely failing to recognize the lethal toxicity of the air heading his way. Over Pompeii, millions of light, porous pumice stones began raining down from the massive cloud. Seeking safety, many families decided against fleeing into the chaotic streets. They barricaded themselves inside their homes, trusting their thick stone walls and heavy tile roofs to protect them from the falling rocks. Meanwhile, the residents of Herculaneum were experiencing a false sense of security. The prevailing winds that afternoon pushed the massive ash clouds southeast, directly over Pompeii. With their skies relatively clear, many in Herculaneum watched the neighboring devastation and assumed the worst would bypass them entirely. Relying on the wind and taking shelter indoors were completely logical decisions based on past experiences. But when the physical rules of nature shift, those exact rationalizations become fatal traps. The roofs of Pompeii soon collapsed under the sheer weight of the accumulating stone, burying the families who trusted them. Around 1 in the morning, the relentless rain of stone over Pompeii finally paused. A thick, suffocating silence settled over the ruined streets. For the exhausted survivors crouching in the dark, this quiet felt like salvation. They thought the mountain had spent its fury. This diagram illustrates exactly why that silence was a trap. For 12 hours, upward pressure held millions of tons of ash suspended above the crater. Losing pressure, the colossal column collapsed inward, transforming into a dense, superheated pyroclastic surge rushing down the slopes. This is a loaf of bread recovered from the ruins, baked perfectly black by the heat. When the first pyroclastic surge slammed into Herculaneum, it carried temperatures so extreme that it carbonized wood, food, and human bodies in a fraction of a second. Hours later, in the dark before dawn, the final surge breached the walls of Pompeii. The air inside the city instantly hit 500 degrees Fahrenheit. Breathing this toxic, scalding gas caused immediate, violent muscle contractions in every living creature, locking them into contorted, defensive postures through extreme thermal shock. Mount Vesuvius didn't slowly smother its victims while they slept. The mechanics of the collapsing ash column executed the remaining population in a single searing breath, before burying them in the dark. The millions of tons of volcanic ash that rained down to erase these thriving Roman cities performed a cruel historical trick. As it cooled and hardened, it protected the ruins from scavengers and the elements, turning Pompeii into an immaculate ancient time capsule. In the 19th century, an archaeologist named Giuseppe Fiorelli noticed strange hollow pockets in the excavated ash layers. By pouring liquid plaster into these cavities, he recreated the exact physical forms of the victims, capturing the precise, agonizing seconds when their lives ended. Today, we look at these plaster casts and marvel at the tragedy of the past. But if you look directly at the foot of the mountain, you'll see a modern metropolis built squarely on top of those ancient, volatile deposits. Italian authorities have designated a zona rossa, the red zone. It is the mapped, projected path of future pyroclastic flows. Currently, 700,000 people live inside its borders, going to work, raising families, and sitting directly in the crosshairs of an active, highly dangerous volcano. The ruins of Pompeii endure as a warning about the fragility of human memory. We still rationalize away the threats we don't want to face. The giant towering over the Bay of Naples is only sleeping. And right now, modern society is making the exact same miscalculation.